Senior year, I was valedictorian. Kevin Price, the class president, was dead last. After graduation, my college applications were all rejected. He got an acceptance letter to a top-tier university. I didn't cry. I didn't throw a fit. I just quietly packed a bag. "Where are you going?" my mom asked. "Joining the Army." 10 years later, our high school reunion was held at a five-star hotel. Kevin, dressed in a sharp suit, told anyone who would listen, "I've got a cushy government job." Then he saw me in the corner and sneered, "What's the point of being a soldier? I make more in a month than you do all year." Just then, the hotel's general manager hurried over, addressing me with deep respect. "Major Hayes, your executive suite is ready. General Thompson and the mayor are waiting for you at the head table." The smile on Kevin's face froze solid. 01 the day I checked my application statuses. The sky was a flat, unforgiving gray. On the phone, my guidance counselor's voice was a strange mix of barely contained excitement and cautious awkwardness. He said the scholarship for the state university's top engineering program, the one everyone wanted, went to someone from our class. I gripped the phone, my palms sweating. I had the highest GPA, the best SAT scores. I was supposed to be a shoo-in. "Is it me, Mr. Davison?" There was a pause on the other end, followed by a dry chuckle. "It's your classmate, Kevin Price. The kid's a real dark horse. Gave us all one heck of a surprise." Kevin Price, the guy who slept through AP Physics and turned in blank tests. I hung up without another word. My dad squatted on the back patio, chain-smoking cigarettes. My mom was in the kitchen, slamming pots and pans around. Each clang felt like a hammer blow to my chest. Dinner was silent. I pushed a forkful of mashed potatoes around my plate for what felt like an hour, unable to eat. "So you blew it?" my mom finally said, her voice like ice. I shook my head. "What's that supposed to mean? Lost your tongue? Your father threw out his back working overtime to pay for your tutors. Is this how you repay him?" My dad took a long drag from his cigarette, his face obscured by a cloud of smoke. "That's enough. Leave the kid alone." 3 days later, the mailman's familiar truck stopped at our curb. "Ethan Hayes got a priority envelope for you." My mom was the first one out the door. She snatched the thick letter from his hand. Her face lit up like she'd just won the lottery. Her fingers trembled as she tore it open. She pulled out the letterhead, and the smile on her face instantly vanished. I walked over and took it from her. The university crest, embossed in gold foil, was the one I had dreamed of for years. But the name printed in crisp, black letters was Mr. Kevin Price. My mom's face went from flushed to pale, then to a sickly shade of green. She grabbed the letter back, turning it over and over as if the paper itself held some hidden explanation. "This is a mistake. It has to be a mistake," she muttered. Then her eyes shot up to meet mine, wide and accusatory. "Was it you? Are you and Kevin so friendly that you put our address on his application?" I stared at her, a cold dread creeping up my spine. I didn't bother explaining. There's no point explaining something to a person who only believes what they want to believe. That night, I heard my parents arguing in their bedroom. "Something's not right. I know what our son is capable of. How could a punk like Kevin Price get in?" My dad's voice was a low rumble. "Not right? What are you going to do about it? You have connections? You can pull some strings?" "No, you're useless." And I was a fool for ever thinking he'd be any different. My mom's voice was sharp and brittle. Then silence. The next morning, I packed my things into an old canvas duffel bag. A few changes of clothes, a paperback I hadn't finished. I opened my bedroom door. My mom was standing in the middle of the living room like a statue. "Where do you think you're going?" Her voice held no concern, only the raw anger of being defied. I looked into her eyes. They were filled with nothing but disappointment. Disappointment that I had failed to become her neighborhood bragging rights. "Joining the Army," I said. Then I opened the front door and walked out. I didn't look back. 02, the early morning air smelled of asphalt and exhaust. I carried my bag and walked the 2 miles to the U.S. Armed Forces Career Center downtown. As I passed City Hall, a black Lincoln Navigator pulled up to the curb. The doors opened, and Kevin and his father got out. His dad was the city's director of planning. I'd seen his picture in a local paper. Kevin saw me. He was decked out in designer clothes, his hair slicked back with gel. He smirked, a look of triumphant mockery in his eyes. He didn't say a word, just mouthed a single one at me. "Loser." I stopped and watched as he and his father walked up the granite steps and into the imposing building. The sun glinted off the glass doors, making me squint. I turned and kept walking. The recruiting office was large and quiet. A few sergeants in crisp uniforms sat at desks, processing paperwork. I walked up to one and placed my driver's license and social security card on the table. I'm here to enlist. The recruiter, a man with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, looked me up and down. You sure about this, son? The Army's hard work. I'm sure. Physicals, background checks. The process was surprisingly fast. The moment my thumb pressed down on the ink pad for my enlistment contract, a massive weight lifted from my shoulders. That afternoon, I walked out with my orders. A few thin sheets of paper, no embossed crests or fancy letterhead, but they felt more real and substantial than any acceptance letter. I didn't go home. I went straight to the Greyhound station. I bought a one-way ticket on the next bus leaving town. The terminal was a chaotic mix of noise and smells. I found a corner seat and held the duffel bag in my lap. I remembered our last day of senior year. Our homeroom teacher asked us to share dreams. I said I wanted to go to the best university, study physics, and make a real contribution. When it was Kevin's turn, he was asleep at his desk. The teacher called his name, and he woke up, rubbing his eyes. My dad's got it all figured out, he mumbled. The whole class laughed. Looking back, it wasn't a joke. It was a statement of fact. The call for boarding echoed through the terminal. I stood up and joined the line of people shuffling toward the gate. Before I stepped onto the bus, I looked back at the city skyline. It was still gray and overcast. I pulled out my old Android phone, the one I'd saved up for months to buy. Not a single missed call, not one new text message. I powered it down, popped out the SIM card, and dropped it into a trash can by the door. The bus pulled away from the station, and the world outside my window began to move in reverse. Buildings, streets, then suburbs and open fields. Everything was receding. My life from that moment on was on a different track. The bus was noisy, crying babies, loud conversations. I leaned my head against the cool glass of the window, hearing none of it. I just watched the telephone poles fly by, one after another. I didn't cry. I'd used up all my tears the day the rejection letters came. All that was left was a fire that wouldn't go out. 03 basic combat, training smelled of sweat, dirt, and pine sol. A bus dropped us off at the foot of a dusty hill in South Carolina, a massive gate with a U.S. Army star emblazoned on it. The second we stepped off, a drill sergeant with skin like tanned leather and the eyes of a hawk started screaming. Move it. You think this is a damn vacation? First stop, the barber. The buzz of the clippers was relentless as my hair fell to the floor in clumps. Staring at the stranger in the mirror with a shaved head, I felt like the old Ethan Hayes was gone for good. Next, we were issued our gear. We shed our civilian clothes and put on the baggy, stiff camouflage uniforms. They smelled of starch and disinfectant. Our drill sergeant's name was Evans. He told us that from that day forward, we didn't have names. We were all just one thing, trainees. The training was hell. Every morning at 0500, before the sun came up, we ran. First 3 miles, then 5. If you couldn't keep up, you didn't get breakfast. I'd always been more book smart than athletic. The first day, I got a crippling side stitch and collapsed, vomiting bile onto the asphalt. Drill Sergeant Evans walked over, but he didn't yell. He just said, "You chose this path. Now you walk it, even if you have to crawl." I gritted my teeth and got back in formation. Drill and ceremony practice meant standing at attention for hours under the blistering sun. Sweat dripped in my eyes, stinging, but we weren't allowed to move, not even to wipe it away. Sergeant Evans said soldiers sweat, they don't cry. At night, every bone in my body ached, but my mind was clearer than ever. I thought of Kevin's smug face and my mother's disappointed eyes. Those images were fuel. When the others slept, I worked. After lights out, I'd sneak to the pull-up bars and do reps until my arms gave out. On weekends, when others had free time, I'd do extra ruck marches, feeling the satisfying burn in my lungs. I channeled all my frustration, anger, and sense of injustice in a physical strength. A month later, we had a fitness evaluation. I finished first in the 5-mile run for the entire company. Sergeant Evans pulled me aside and handed me a canteen. "Not bad, Hayes. When you first got here, I thought you were too soft. Figured you'd wash out in a week. I twisted the cap off and took a long drink. I want to be stronger, drill sergeant. He clapped me on the shoulder, a flicker of approval in his eyes. In the Army, if you've got the will, you'll get the strength. Nobody here gives a damn who your daddy is. All that matters is how much sweat you're willing to put in. His words almost made me tear up. Life in basic training was simple, brutal, and fair. Every ounce of effort was rewarded. Every bit of progress was recognized. I started devouring everything. Marksmanship, hand-to-hand combat, military strategy. I applied the same intensity one once had for my studies. My rifle qualification scores went from barely passing to expert. My written exams were always perfect scores. When the 10 weeks of basic training were over, I was the sole recipient of the Distinguished Honor Graduate Award. Sergeant Evans walked me to the bus for my next assignment. He stuffed a piece of paper in my hand with his phone number on it. You ever need anything, you call me. I gave him the sharpest salute of my life. Sitting on the bus, heading to my first duty station, watching the rolling hills pass by, I felt for the first time that the sky was truly blue. 04, I was assigned to the 788th Cyber Intelligence Brigade at Fort Meade, Maryland. This was the nerve center of the Army's digital warfare operations, a world of humming servers and complex networks. Most of the soldiers assigned here were specialists. My company's first sergeant was a man named Mark Jensen. He was a master sergeant, a lifer who seemed deceptively mild-mannered behind his glasses. He reviewed my file, noting the Distinguished Honor Graduate Award and my perfect test scores. He assigned me to the core server room. Hayes, I know you were a hotshot in basic, but this is a different world, Jensen said, adjusting his glasses. Up here, it's about brains and technical skill. Any mistake can compromise an entire mission. I nodded. Understood, First Sergeant. The veteran NCOs in the server room weren't impressed by my award. To them, basic training excellence just meant you could run fast and yell loud. In their world of network engineering and cybersecurity, that was worthless. One NCO in particular, a sergeant first class named Phil, was the room's top technician, and he made sure everyone knew it. He glanced at me, then pointed to a row of humming server racks. New guy, go clean. I didn't say a word. I grabbed a broom and a cloth and got to work. The cleanliness standards in a server room are extreme. I wiped down every crevice of every cabinet until they gleamed. For the next month, my life consisted of cleaning floors and making coffee runs for the senior NCOs. When they worked on the systems, I stood behind them, watching, silently memorizing every command, every procedure. At night, when they were gone, I checked out textbook from the base library, principles of communication, data exchange networks, and devoured them. My background in advanced physics and calculus from high school gave me a huge advantage. Theories that stumped veteran technicians I could grasp after a few read-throughs. My chance came sooner than I expected. During a massive Army-wide war game exercise, our unit was tasked with providing all technical support. We were running on fumes, working around the clock. At the most critical moment of the exercise, a core server simulating the enemy force's network suddenly went offline. Half the screens in the command center went black. First Sergeant Jensen's face went pale, sweat beading on his forehead. He barked into his radio, "Phil, what's going on? Get it back online now." Phil was frantically typing at a keyboard, his expression growing grimmer by the second. "No good, First Sergeant. I can't find the problem. Hardware diagnostics are clean. I've rebooted the software, but it won't connect." The phone started ringing off the hook, senior officers on the other end, their voices sharp with anger. If the network wasn't restored in 3 minutes, all the key data from the exercise would be lost, and the simulated enemy force would be completely paralyzed. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. I had been standing in the back, staring at the offline server. Its status light was blinking in an erratic, irregular pattern. I suddenly remembered a case study I'd read in a textbook about how high-frequency signal interference could cause momentary voltage drops in a power supply module, leading to packet loss. "First Sergeant," I said, unable to stop myself. "Let me try." Everyone turned to look at me, their expressions a mix of shock and disbelief. Jensen paused. Phil spun around and yelled, "Try what? You're a private. Get the hell out of the way before you break something." "Let him try." Jensen suddenly decided. "Phil, step aside." Phil reluctantly moved. I walked to the console, but I didn't touch the keyboard. I went straight to the back of the server rack, opened the rear panel, and located the power supply module. I pointed to a small, unremarkable capacitor. The problem should be here. During the exercise, the equipment is running at full power. This capacitor's rating is likely too low, causing voltage instability under high load, which is interrupting the data stream. If we bypass it and switch to the backup power link, it should work. Phil scoffed. That's bullshit. The hardware diagnostics passed. But Jensen was looking at me, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. How sure are you? 90%. I answered. Do it. I grabbed a toolkit, and following the schematic in my head, I quickly rerouted the circuit, bypassing the faulty capacitor. The whole process took less than 30 seconds. As I closed the rear panel, the server's status light flickered a few times, then turned a solid, steady green. Every screen in the command center lit up at once. The voice of an excited officer came through the radio. Signal restored. Comms unit, outstanding work. The server room was dead silent for a moment, then erupted in a roar of cheers. Jensen walked over and punched me on the shoulder, hard enough to make me wince. His eyes were a little red. Good work, kid. You saved the whole company's ass. Phil stood off to the side, his face flushed, staring at me like I was some kind of alien. After that exercise, I was awarded an Army Commendation Medal. And from that day on, no one in the 788th ever asked me to clean the floors again. 05, because of my performance in that war game, I became the company's go-to technical expert. 2 years later, I was promoted to sergeant. The summer after I made rank, our region was hit by a once-in-a-century flood. The nearby town became a churning lake, and countless homes were underwater. Our unit was immediately deployed for disaster relief. My squad and I were in a Zodiac boat, navigating the treacherous, fast-moving floodwaters, searching for stranded civilians. The rain came down in sheets, stinging our faces. The water was a brown soup of mud, debris, and hidden dangers. After 2 straight days and nights of rescues, we had pulled hundreds of people to safety. We were all running on empty. Just as we were about to head back for a break, a frantic call came over the radio. West Bank. There are still people on the West Bank. A bridge is about to give way, and there's a child on it. We immediately spun the boat around and sped toward the location. In the distance, we could see an old stone bridge being battered by the flood. Huge cracks were visible in its support columns. It could collapse at any second. Angry waves crashed over the top. A little girl in a red raincoat was clinging to the railing, screaming in terror. On the far shore, her parents were crying hysterically, too terrified to go near the bridge. "We can't make it. The boat won't get close enough," our squad leader yelled over the roar of the water. "The current's too strong. We'll capsize." First Sergeant Jensen, who was commanding our sector, made the call. He raised a bullhorn and shouted, "All units, pull back. That bridge is coming down." "That's an order." Everyone started to retreat, but my eyes were fixed on the little girl. She couldn't have been more than 6 or 7. The look of pure, helpless terror on her face was a knife in my gut. I suddenly thought of myself 10 years ago. The circumstances were different, but that feeling of being alone, abandoned by the world, I knew it all too well. I couldn't let her die in front of me. "First Sergeant, let me go." I unclipped my safety line. "Tie the other end to the boat." "I can get her." "Are you crazy, Hayes?" Jensen grabbed my arm. "That's an order. You'll be committing suicide." "First Sergeant, I've done the math. My weight plus the child's. If I'm fast enough, I have a 15-second window before the bridge gives. This rope is strong enough, and the guys on the boat can anchor us." My voice was calm, but with a certainty that allowed no argument. Jensen looked into my eyes and saw no fear, only unshakable resolve. He let go of my arm and said only one word, "Go." I looped the safety line around my waist, tied it off, took a deep breath, and dove into the icy, churning water. I swam with everything I had, fighting a current that felt like a living beast trying to drag me under. On the Zodiac, my squad mates held the line taut, giving me an anchor. Finally, I pulled myself onto the crumbling bridge. The little girl saw me and cried even harder. "It's okay. I'm here to take you home," I said, working as fast as I could. I scooped her up and used a spare line to secure her to my body. The moment I turned to leave, the bridge beneath my feet groaned, a sickening sound of rock grinding against rock. Pull! I screamed at the top of my lungs toward the boat. My squad pulled as one, and the line went taut. Holding the child, I used the momentum to leap from the bridge toward the boat. In the same second my feet left the surface, the entire structure collapsed with a deafening roar, disappearing into the raging flood. The girl and I hit the water hard. I swallowed a mouthful of mud, but my team hauled us onto the boat in seconds. The girl's parents waded into the water, grabbing their daughter and collapsing in tears of relief. When we got back to base, I was confined to the barracks for disobeying a direct order. But 3 days later, what I received wasn't a punishment. It was a formal commendation for valor and the Soldier's Medal. That year, because of my actions during the flood, I was given a rare honor, a direct appointment to the United States Military Academy at West Point. 06 the day I walked through the gates of West Point, I called home. It was the first time I had initiated contact in 5 years. My mom answered. Hello. Her voice was the same as I remembered, cool, with a hint of impatience. Mom, it's me. The silence on the other end of the line stretched on for so long I thought she'd hung up. Oh, she finally said. What is it? I got into West Point. I told her. HM. Okay. Her tone was flat, emotionless. If there's nothing else, I'm busy. The line went dead. I stood there, holding the receiver, an empty feeling in my stomach. Maybe, after all this time, I'd stopped expecting anything else. Life as a cadet was even more demanding than my time as an enlisted soldier. On top of the grueling physical and tactical training, there was a mountain of academic coursework. Advanced mathematics, electrical engineering, information warfare theory, strategic command. The subjects I had excelled at in high school came back in a far more complex and challenging form. I was like a dry sponge, soaking up everything I could. I spent all my time in the library or on the training grounds. When other cadets went out on weekends, I studied. When I watched movies at night, I was in the simulation labs. 4 years later, I graduated at the top of my class, was commissioned as a second lieutenant, and because of my exceptional technical skills, was assigned to the U.S. Army Cyber Command. This was a more secretive, more critical world. Here, I finally came face to face with the core of modern warfare. Over the next few years, I went from being a junior analyst to a project lead, then a department head. My rank went from second lieutenant to captain and then to major. Several of the systems I developed won the Army's highest awards for technological advancement. The collection of ribbons and medals on my dress uniform grew. 10 years. It had gone by in a flash. I had transformed from an 18-year-old kid into a 28-year-old field grade officer. Years in the military had tanned my skin and sharpened my gaze. The bookish boy I once was had vanished completely. I had almost forgotten the past. I'd almost forgotten Kevin Price and the family that had let me walk away. Until the day a package arrived from my hometown. I opened it. Inside was a gold-embossed invitation. Northwood High School class reunion, 10 years. The list of organizers was printed at the bottom. The first name was Kevin Price. Below his name was a small line of text. Reunion Committee Chair, Project Manager, Northwood City Planning Department. Staring at his name, the placid lake of my memory rippled. The images I had buried for a decade resurfaced. The acceptance letter with his name on it, his mouthed insult, my mother's cold eyes. A fellow officer, a captain, walked by and saw me staring at the invitation. What's that, Major Hayes? He asked with a grin. You look like you just got your deployment orders. I folded the invitation and put it away. Something like that, I said. A battle 10 years in the making. He didn't get it, just clapped me on the shoulder and walked away. I picked up my desk phone and dialed the transport office. I need a plane ticket to Northwood for the day after tomorrow. Yes, sir. It was time to go back. Not to show off, not for revenge, but to finally close a chapter of my life. 07 the plane touched down in the city I hadn't seen in a decade. Through the window, I saw a new skyline. Gleaming skyscrapers and flashing lights had replaced the familiar, smaller city of my memories. It had grown and changed, and so had I. I hadn't told my parents I was coming. Since that call 5 years ago, our communication had dwindled to a perfunctory, twice-a-year phone call on Thanksgiving and Christmas. I'd call from a base phone and say, I'm doing fine, and my mom would reply with a clipped, okay. We were like strangers connected by a single, frayed thread that neither of us wanted to pull nor completely sever. Stepping out of the airport, the familiar, humid, industrial air hit me. I felt no sense of nostalgia, only a deep, calm stillness. I hailed a cab and gave the driver the address from the invitation, the Grand Northwood Hotel. The driver was a talkative middle-aged man who sized me up in the rearview mirror. "Back in town to visit family, son?" "Something like that," I replied quietly. "Figured. You got that look about you." "Military?" he asked shrewdly. I gave a non-committal smile. Years of service had ingrained a certain bearing in me that was hard to miss. A straight spine, a watchful gaze, an air of contained intensity. "The Grand Northwood? Huh? That's the nicest hotel in the city. Only the real big shots go there," the driver mused. "Heard some VIPs are in town tonight. They've even got part of the street blocked off." VIPs? I didn't pay it much mind. The only big shot I was concerned with tonight was the reunion committee chair, Kevin Price. The cab pulled up to the hotel. I paid the driver and got out with my simple military-issue backpack. The doorman, seeing my plain clothes and stark appearance, gave me a subtle, dismissive glance but maintained his professional courtesy and opened the door. I didn't go straight to the ballroom. I went to the front desk and checked in using my military ID. The front desk manager came over personally to handle it. When he saw the ID, S, Army, Major, Cyber Command, his demeanor changed instantly. "Sir, my deepest apologies. We weren't aware of your arrival," he said, his voice hushed and deferential. "Let me upgrade you immediately to one of our executive suites." "That won't be necessary. A standard room is fine. I'm just here for a high school reunion." I cut him off. "Of course, sir. Here is your key card. Please let me know if there is anything at all you require," he said, handing me the card with both hands. I went up to my room, showered, and changed into my classy uniform. I didn't wear my full rack of medals, just a simple, unadorned green service uniform. I stood before the mirror and squared away my uniform. The man in the mirror had broad shoulders and a straight back. His eyes were calm and steady. He bore no resemblance to the boy I was at 18. I took a deep breath, opened the door, and walked toward a battlefield I had left a decade ago. The reunion ballroom was a cacophony of loud music, forced laughter, and boastful conversation. When I pushed open the doors, almost no one noticed. The air was thick with a mixture of perfume, alcohol, and the cloying scent of manufactured success. Men in ill-fitting suits bragged about their stock portfolios and their new cars. Women compared handbags, husbands, and children. I didn't recognize most of them. 10 years had etched new lines on their faces, replacing youthful uncertainty with either shrewdness or fatigue. I found a quiet table in the corner and poured myself a glass of iced tea. I hated these kind of gatherings, too loud, too fake. In the Army, relationships were simpler. If you were a hero, people respected you. If you were a coward, they didn't. There was no pretense. Well, if it isn't our old valedictorian, Ethan Hayes. I looked up. A man with thinning hair and wire-rimmed glasses stood over me. It took me a moment to place him as our former student council treasurer. "Hello," I said, standing to nod at him. "Hey, sit down, make yourself at home," he said, waving a hand and plopping into the chair opposite me. He looked me up and down. "Heard you went into the Army. Where are you stationed these days?" "Still in." Right on. "Defending the country," he said, though his eyes held a hint of pity. "It's a steady job, I guess. Tough work, but stable." His definition of stable and mine were clearly two different things. Just then, a commotion erupted near the entrance. A man with a prominent beer belly, squeezed into a shiny Armani suit, entered the room surrounded by a small entourage. It was Kevin Price. He was at least 50 pounds heavier than I remembered, his face slick with sweat and his hair meticulously combed. He was beaming, a thick cigar clamped between his fingers, shaking hands and clapping backs like a king surveying his court. "Kevin, Mr. Project Manager, we were all waiting for you." "Kev, my man, heard you just got another big city contract approved. You gotta hook a brother up." Kevin soaked in the adoration, laughing loudly. "Easy, guys, easy. Just serving the people, you know? All in a day's work." His eyes scanned the room, and finally, they landed on my quiet corner. He saw me. His smile faltered for a fraction of a second, then reformed into a broader, more contemptuous smirk. He pushed past his admirers and strode directly toward me. The entire ballroom seemed to quiet down, all eyes following him as he crossed the floor. He stopped in front of my table, looking down at me with the same condescending air he'd had 10 years ago outside City Hall. "Ethan Hayes? Holy crap, it really is you. I didn't think you'd have the guts to show," he announced, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "So, how's life treating you? Still playing soldier? What are you now, a lieutenant? A captain?" Faced with Kevin's belligerent questioning, I simply looked up at him, calm and silent. I didn't stand up. I didn't speak. My silence seemed to irritate him. He wanted me to be flustered, angry, or ashamed. He got none of it. My gaze was as still and deep as a mountain lake. "What's the matter? Cat got your tongue? Or did they just train you to say, sir? Yes, sir?" Kevin's tone grew sharper. "Guess you're pretty disconnected from the real world. Here, let me introduce you around. This is Dave, from the Chamber of Commerce. That's Maria. She's with the IRS. We're all public servants now. You know, real government jobs." He pointed a thumb at his own chest, the cigar jutting out arrogantly. "As for me, I'm a project manager at the city planning department. Just a humble civil servant, nothing special." He said, humble, but he practically shouted, "project manager." A chorus of sycophantic agreement rose from the surrounding classmates. "Kevin's too modest. A project manager in that department holds all the cards. Yeah, every major development project in this city goes through your desk. You're not just a manager, you're the gatekeeper." Basking in the praise, Kevin turned his attention back to me, his tone shifting to one of condescending pity. "Look, Ethan, I'm not trying to be a jerk. You were smart back in the day, but book smarts don't get you anywhere in the real world. It's all about connections, your network. You get it? You wasted 10 years in the service, all by yourself. What do you even make? 60, 70 grand a year?" He shook his head, a look of profound disappointment on his face. "I'm telling you, man, even if you make it to retirement, you'll have to start all over again. You'll be begging us for a job. Was it really worth it?" I finally spoke, my voice quiet but clear. "My salary is determined by my rank and time in service, according to federal law." It was not the answer he wanted. It was like punching a pillow. It only made him angrier. "Federal law? What the hell is that? My 401k matching is more than your entire paycheck," he snapped, stubbing out his cigar in an ashtray. "I'm telling you, the path you took is a dead end. My path, that's the path to success. So what if you were valedictorian? Who got into the top university?" "Me." He was practically screaming the last part. The ballroom went silent. Everyone stared, their expressions ranging from shock to pity, but mostly they were just enjoying the show. So, he wasn't even trying to hide what happened. He was proud of it. It was a trophy. I looked at his face, red with exertion, his expression almost comical in its rage. I had thought, hoped, that after a decade he might feel a sliver of guilt. I had overestimated him. Some people are just rotten to the core. I didn't argue. I didn't get angry. I knew it was a waste of breath. I simply picked up my glass of iced tea, preparing to take a sip. Just then, the ballroom doors swung open again. The hotel's general manager, the same man who had checked me in, rushed into the room, looking panicked. 2 assistants in black suits followed closely behind him. He ignored everyone, his eyes scanning the room like a radar, his forehead beaded with sweat. His gaze finally locked onto my corner. When he saw me, his face flooded with relief. He practically ran toward my table. The general manager, a Mr. Liu, was a man in his 40s, slightly overweight, but moved with surprising speed. He pushed through the crowd, ignoring the outstretched hands and fawning smiles, and came to a dead stop at my table. He didn't look at anyone else, not even Kevin, whose face was already beginning to change. His eyes were only for me. "Sir," Mr. Liu bowed a full 90 degrees, his voice trembling with a mixture of anxiety and deep respect. "My sincerest apologies. It was a failure on our part to allow you to be disturbed down here. The dinner upstairs has already begun. General Thompson and the mayor's party have arrived, and they are waiting for you." The word "sir," delivered with such reverence, was like a bomb detonating in the silent ballroom. Everyone was stunned. They looked from me to the manager. The GM of a 5-star hotel was bowing to a guy they all thought was just some grunt, calling him sir, and talking about generals and mayors. What was going on? Was this a prank show? The color drained from Kevin's face, leaving it a pasty, mottled gray. He felt like a fool. One minute he was bragging about his government job and mocking my dead-end career, and the next, the hotel's top executive was rushing in and treating me like royalty. It was more humiliating than a slap in the face. "Mr. Liu, are you sure you have the right person?" Kevin stammered, trying desperately to salvage the situation. "This is Ethan Hayes, my old classmate. He's just a soldier. How could he be?" Mr. Liu finally seemed to notice Kevin's existence. He straightened up, his deferential expression instantly replaced by a mask of cold professionalism. He didn't even look at Kevin, but addressed me in a questioning tone. "Sir, is this person with you?" That simple act was more devastating than any insult. He had just demonstrated that in his world, the self-important project manager Kevin Price was a complete and utter nobody. Before I could answer, Kevin looked like he was about to have a stroke. He felt utterly humiliated. "I'm Kevin Price, from a city planning department. My father is Director Price." He played his last and only card, throwing out his name and connection. Mr. Liu, however, just gave a bland, "ah," and turned his attention back to me, awaiting my instructions. He clearly had no idea, nor did he care, who Director Price was. This absolute dismissal seemed to suck all the air out of Kevin. The status and connections he was so proud of had just been rendered worthless. I stood up, adjusted the hem of my uniform jacket, and said to the manager, "Thank you, Mr. Liu. I'll just say goodbye to my classmates and be right there." "Yes, sir. Of course, sir. I will wait for you by the door." Mr. Liu bowed again, then turned and walked briskly away without a single backward glance at Kevin Price. You could have heard a pin drop in the ballroom. The looks on my classmates' faces had shifted from amusement to shock, confusion, and a dawning sense of awe. They were finally realizing that the quiet man who had been sitting in the corner all night was far more than he appeared. Kevin just stood there, his mouth hanging open, unable to make a sound. He felt the weight of every stare like a physical blow. The pedestal of superiority he had built for himself had just been shattered into a million pieces. I picked up my now warm glass of iced tea and walked over to him. He instinctively took a step back. I looked him in the eye and said calmly, "You were right. The paths we took are very different." Then, I slowly poured the contents of my glass onto the floor at his feet. I turned and walked toward the door. 11. Just as I reached the ballroom entrance, the heavy wooden doors were pushed open from the outside. A powerful presence seemed to fill the room. Standing in the doorway was an older gentleman in a decorated army general's uniform, a single silver star gleaming on each shoulder. He was well past middle age, but his back was ramrod straight, and his eyes were as sharp as a hawk's. Behind him stood a young aide, also in uniform, holding a briefcase. The moment the self-proclaimed power players in the ballroom saw that star, they collectively held their breath. That single star represented a level of authority they could only dream of. General Thompson, Mr. Liu, the hotel manager, rushed forward, bowing even lower than before. General Thompson gave a slight nod, his gaze sweeping over the crowd and landing on me. His brow furrowed with the mild annoyance of a senior officer for a subordinate. "Ethan, what's the hold-up? I told you it was just an informal dinner, a chance to chat. How did you end up in here? We got a room full of people waiting on you." His voice was commanding, booming with the natural authority of a career officer. The words were a reprimand, but the tone was one of unmistakable familiarity and high regard. I immediately snapped to attention and delivered a crisp salute. "Sir, I ran into some old classmates. I apologize for the delay." The general waved it off and strode toward me. What old classmates could possibly be more important than the project briefing? "I told you, headquarters is extremely interested in your Phase 2 optimization proposal for the Argus system. I brought you here tonight so you could walk us through it." He reached my side and clapped a hand on my shoulder. It was only then that he seemed to notice my simple service uniform. "Why are you wearing this? Where are your medals? If I recall correctly, you have a Distinguished Service Cross and 2 silver stars, don't you? Especially for that operation on the border last year. You and your team dismantled that entire tech espionage ring, and the intel you recovered gave us the upper hand in the diplomatic talks. That was a textbook operation, one for the history books of Army Cyber Command. Don't be so modest, son. Those medals were earned with grit, not given for showing up. Every word the general spoke was like a sledgehammer, striking the heart of every person in the room. Distinguished Service Cross, Silver Stars, Border Operation, Tech Espionage Ring, one for the history books. To the local business owners and city employees in the room, these things were the stuff of movies, impossibly distant from their own lives. But the man who had done these things was standing right in front of them. It was the same man Kevin Price had just spent the last 10 minutes mocking as a failure. Everyone's eyes slowly turned to Kevin. His face was no longer pale. It was the color of ash. He was trembling, a cold sweat soaking through his expensive Armani suit. He finally understood what kind of person he had been taunting. This wasn't just a soldier. This was a bona fide war hero. His title of project manager, his cushy government job, in the face of medals earned with blood and courage, they were less than nothing. He thought back to 10 years ago, when he had stolen another man's future, relying on his father's influence to get into a good school and a secure job. He had always seen himself as the winner. Only now did he realize that all he had stolen was a spot at a university. In the meantime, Ethan Hayes had walked a different path and reached a height so far above him that he wasn't even qualified to look up. General Thompson seemed to notice the strange atmosphere. He glanced at Kevin's ghastly face, then at the puddle of iced tea on the carpet. He frowned and looked at me. What happened here? I shook my head. It's nothing, sir. A small misunderstanding. Misunderstanding. The general was no fool. He understood the situation immediately. He didn't press the issue, just shot Kevin a look of utter contempt, the kind one gives to an insect. Then he put an arm around my shoulder, his demeanor warm and paternal. Come on, let's not keep everyone waiting. Mayor Stevens is eager to meet you. He's been telling everyone that having a man like you come from our city is an honor for all of Northwood. 12 escorted by General Thompson and the hotel management. I left the ballroom. The doors closed softly behind me, sealing off 2 different worlds. Outside was a brightly lit corridor leading to the hotel's finest private dining room. Inside was a high school reunion that had fallen into a dead, oppressive silence. After I left, the atmosphere in the ballroom became suffocating. The boisterous party was now as cold as a morgue. No one spoke. No one ate. No one even dared to breathe too loudly. The general's intimidating presence seemed to linger in the air. All eyes were on Kevin Price. But the gazes no longer held envy or admiration. Now, they were filled with pity, contempt, and a hint of malicious satisfaction. Kevin stood alone, a defeated animal stripped of its claws and teeth. His designer suit now looked ridiculous, his beer belly pathetic. He tried to say something to break the tension, but his throat was tight, and no words came out. He felt as if he had been thrown from the clouds and plunged deep into the mud. The classmates who had been orbiting him all night, calling him Kev and Boss, now avoided him like the plague. They quietly slipped away, staring at their phones, pretending nothing had happened. The former student council treasurer, the one who had spoken to me earlier, walked over to Kevin with a drink in his hand. Kevin, he said in a low voice, you really screwed up this time. Ethan is... Get the hell away from me. Kevin suddenly snapped, his voice a low, guttural hiss. Who the hell are you to lecture me? The treasurer's face went white. He just shook his head and walked away. The reunion was over. People began to leave in small groups, deliberately walking around Kevin. The event that was meant to be a joyous celebration of the past had dissolved into a bitter, humiliating fiasco. Soon, the vast ballroom was empty except for one person. Kevin Price collapsed into a chair, staring blankly at the tables of untouched food. He grabbed a bottle of Macallan 18 from the bar and drank straight from it, the fiery scotch burning his throat, but doing nothing to chase away the icy dread in his heart. He knew he was finished. He hadn't just insulted an old classmate. He had publicly humiliated a decorated major, a war hero personally esteemed by a commanding general. That one cold look from General Thompson was a death sentence. He couldn't even begin to imagine what was waiting for him tomorrow. Meanwhile, I was in the penthouse dining room. Seated around a large mahogany table were several men I had only ever seen on the news, senior military leaders and top city officials. When I entered, they all stood up. Mayor Stevens walked over and grasped my hand firmly. Major Hayes, welcome home. On behalf of the entire city of Northwood, I want to express our deepest gratitude for your extraordinary service to our country." I was taken aback by the reception and instinctively saluted. "It's an honor to serve, sir." During the dinner, no one mentioned the incident downstairs. Instead, we discussed technological development and national defense. I briefed them on some of my current projects, and they listened intently, asking insightful questions. I was the lowest-ranking person at the table, but I was treated as an equal. They respected my expertise and the tangible value I brought to the nation's security. After a while, I excused myself and walked to the massive floor-to-ceiling windows. Outside, the city glittered, a river of light and life under the night sky. 10 years ago, I had left this place in the pre-dawn darkness with nothing but a duffel bag and a broken heart. 10 years later, I stood at its highest point, looking down on the land I had sworn an oath to protect. I took out my encrypted military-issue phone and found the number simply labeled home. I dialed. It rang for a long time before someone picked up. "Hello." It was my mom's voice, so familiar yet so distant. "Mom, it's me," I said, my voice calm and gentle as I watched the city lights. "I'm back in town. I'll be home for dinner tomorrow." 13, my mother was silent on the other end of the line. A long, heavy silence, filled only with the faint hiss of the connection. I could picture her expression perfectly. Shock, confusion, and a complete loss for words. After what felt like an eternity, she responded in a voice I had never heard before, hesitant, fragile, and trembling slightly. "Okay, just one word." But I knew that the mountain of ice that had stood between us for 10 years had just begun to thaw. I ended the call and returned to the table. General Thompson and Mayor Stevens didn't ask about the call. They just warmly invited me to have more to eat. They were perceptive men. They could read the subtle change in my expression. That dinner was a surreal experience. Meanwhile, the ballroom I had left behind was the stage for the final act of a tragedy. I heard later that after everyone left, Kevin Price drank 3 bottles of scotch by himself. He was eventually found passed out at the table, sobbing like a child. Everything he had built his life and identity on had been utterly demolished in a single evening. The next morning, Kevin was awoken from his hungover stupor by a sharp slap across the face from his father. "You useless, incompetent fool." Director Price's eyes were bloodshot, his voice shaking with rage. "Do you have any idea who you insulted? A major in Army Cyber Command, a decorated hero, a man General Thompson himself is mentoring. You brought up a 10-year-old scandal you were at the center of? Are you trying to destroy yourself and take me down with you?" Kevin was terrified into sobriety. He knew I was an officer, but he had no idea my connections ran so deep. "Dad, I didn't know. What do I do? Dad, you have to help me," he pleaded, grabbing his father's leg. Director Price kicked him away, his face a mask of utter despair. He had spent all night calling in every favor he had, trying to get information. The more he learned, the more terrified he became. Ethan Hayes' military file was classified, but his commendations were a matter of public record. And General Thompson's personal involvement elevated the incident from a personal dispute to an issue of military honor. "Help you? Who's going to help me?" Director Price sank onto the sofa. "It's over. It's all over." His premonition was correct. On Monday morning, when Kevin walked into the city planning department, the atmosphere was icy. His colleagues avoided his gaze, treating him like a ghost. He had barely sat down at his desk when the department head informed him, his face devoid of expression, "Kevin, the ethics committee is waiting for you in the conference room." The words ethics committee made his legs feel like jelly. In the conference room, 2 grim-faced investigators showed him their credentials. "Mr. Price, you are under investigation for serious ethical violations and potential abuse of power. Please come with us." As he was escorted out of the building, the entire office watched in silence. At the same time, across town at the Board of Education, his father met a similar fate. State investigators, bypassing local authorities entirely, took him into custody. The official reason was investigation into allegations of abuse of authority in the student admissions process. The first case on their list was a decade-old college application scandal. The tree had fallen, and the monkeys had scattered. The Price family's world had collapsed overnight. I learned all of this the next day, and a phone call from a mayor's chief of staff as I was preparing to go home. His tone was casual. Major Hayes, the city's actions regarding the Price family reflect our commitment to clean government. It has nothing to do with you, so please don't feel any burden. You've brought great honor to this city. The least we can do is ensure our heroes are not betrayed at home. I was silent for a long moment, then just said, "Thank you." 14, I took a taxi back to the old neighborhood instead of the car the military had sent. In 10 years, almost nothing had changed. The same cracked sidewalks, the same faded siding on the houses. The same neighbors sat on their front porches, gossiping in the afternoon sun. They gave the stranger in the crisp army uniform curious looks, but no one recognized me as the quiet, bookish kid who used to live there. I stopped in front of my childhood home. The paint on the front door was peeling. I could hear my mother's muffled voice inside. I took a deep breath and knocked. The voice inside stopped. A few seconds later, the door creaked open. My mother stood there. She froze, a dish towel still in her hand. Her hair was mostly gray now, and the lines around her eyes were deeper. We stood there, mother and son, separated by a decade of silence and a worn-out welcome mat. A complex storm of emotions played across her face. Shock, regret, and a painful, unspoken love. She opened her mouth to say something, but no words came out. It was my dad who broke the silence. He came out from the living room, and his eyes immediately reddened. "You're home. It's good to have you home," he said, his voice thick. He started to raise a hand to pat my shoulder, but then he saw the silver oak leaf rank insignia and hesitated, letting his hand fall back to his side. "Dad," I said, then stepped inside. The house was exactly as I remembered it, just older. The academic awards I had won in high school were still pinned to a corkboard on the wall, their paper yellowed with age. My mother finally snapped out of her trance. She nervously wiped her hands on her apron. "Sit down. Please sit. Dinner. Dinner is almost ready." The meal was eaten in an almost complete, agonizing silence. My mom kept piling food onto my plate until it was a small mountain. She searched for things to say, but the questions felt clumsy and inadequate. Is it okay? In the army, she finally managed. "It's fine. Is it hard work?" "Sometimes." The conversation was stilted, like one between strangers. My dad just sat there, sipping a beer, occasionally glancing at me with a look of profound guilt and immense pride. I knew that a 10-year chasm couldn't be bridged by a single meal. As we sat in awkward silence, the local noon news played on the old television in the living room. And in city news, Mayor Stevens met with senior military leadership today to discuss regional development and cooperation. General Thompson of the U.S. Army was in attendance. The screen showed footage from the dinner the night before. My mother glanced up absently, and then her fork clattered onto her plate. The camera panned across the head table. There, sitting next to the mayor, was a young man in a decorated army uniform, his posture impeccable. That man was me. My mom stared at the screen, not blinking, as if afraid the image was a mirage. She saw the mayor leaning in to speak to me, saw the general clapping my shoulder, saw the table of high-ranking officials treating me as one of their own. It was a world she couldn't even imagine, and her son was sitting at its center. The news segment ended, but my mother continued to stare at the flickering static on the old TV. After a long, long time, she slowly turned her head to look at me. Tears began to stream down her face, not with loud sobs, but in silent, steady rivers. She looked at me, her lips trembling, and finally said the words I had waited 10 years to hear. "My son, all these years, you must have suffered so much." The next morning, I said goodbye to my parents and prepared to return to my post. Overnight, my mother seemed to have aged, but she had also softened. She made me breakfast, fussing over me, telling me to take care of myself, not to work too hard. "Don't worry about us," she said. "We're fine." I knew that the news broadcast had shattered the last remnants of her resentment and bitterness. She finally understood that her son had walked a path far more glorious and far more difficult than she had ever imagined. The wound between us wasn't healed, but the door that had been sealed shut for a decade was finally open a crack. Before I left, she pulled a small wooden box from the back of a closet and pressed it into my hands. "These are your things from high school. I kept them for you." I opened it. Inside was my old student ID, my SAT score report, and a graduation photo of my entire class. In the photo, an 18-year-old me stood in the front row, smiling, my eyes bright and clear. Behind me stood Kevin Price, a cocky smirk on his face. So much had changed. I closed the box and gave my parents a slow, formal salute. "Dad, Mom, I'm leaving." My father, his eyes shining with tears, awkwardly tried to return the salute. My mother just covered her mouth, trying not to cry. I turned and walked away without looking back. I knew their eyes would be on me until I disappeared around the corner. On the way to the airport, I got a call from my first ever commanding officer, Mark Jensen. He was now the command sergeant major of the entire brigade. "Hey, you little punk. Heard you went home and stirred up a whole hornet's nest." His familiar, booming voice came through the phone. "Sergeant Major, don't give me a hard time." "I'm not giving you a hard time. I'm proud of you," he said, his tone growing serious. "I heard you took down that Price kid and his corrupt old man. Good riddance. We need to root out that kind of rot. You're not just a good soldier, you're a good man. You did us proud." I smiled. "I didn't do anything." "I know you didn't," Jensen said, "but you did everything. You spent 10 years working your ass off, and that was the loudest statement you could have ever made. You remember this, Ethan, your rank, your medals, you earned every single one of them with your own blood, sweat, and brains. You don't owe anyone a damn thing. And if anyone ever tries to give you grief again, you tell them they'll have to go through me first." Hanging up, I looked out the window at the passing city, a sense of peace settling over me. He was right. I hadn't done anything. I hadn't filed a complaint. I hadn't sought revenge, and I hadn't used my position to crush anyone. I had simply chosen a different path and walked it with everything I had. Justice may be delayed, but if you become strong enough, it is never denied. The plane taxied down the runway, accelerated, and climbed into the sky. As I looked down at the shrinking city below, the last vestiges of my old bitterness vanished into the clouds. The summer of betrayal and anger was finally, truly, over. My phone vibrated. It was an encrypted message from my direct superior. "Project Argus Phase 3 has been approved. You are assigned as lead designer. Return to base immediately." I powered off the phone, closed my eyes, and leaned back in my seat. My war was just beginning, and my battlefield was higher up, much farther away. 16, I returned to base the next day. Our facility wasn't in a bustling city, but hidden deep within a mountain range outside Washington, D.C. From the outside, it looked like a quiet government retreat. Only those with the highest clearance knew that beneath the unassuming buildings lay one of the world's most advanced electronic warfare and cyber intelligence centers. This was where I had spent the last 8 years, the headquarters of the 788th Cyber Intelligence Brigade. I had barely dropped my bag in my quarters when my aide, a young specialist named Wong, knocked on the door. "Sir, DR. Wallace needs you in conference room 1 immediately." DR. Wallace was the civilian director of our R&D division, a man who looked more like a university professor than the head of a top-secret military project. He was the original architect of the Argus system. I changed into a standard, rank-less lab coat and hurried over. The massive conference table was already full. These were the lead engineers and scientists for every Argus subsystem, grizzled veterans with decades of experience, and young prodigies who were the best in their fields. When I walked in, all eyes turned to me. DR. Wallace pointed to the empty seat beside him. "Ethan, we were waiting for you." After I sat, he got straight to the point. The holographic display behind him lit up, showing a deep field of stars dotted with red and blue icons representing global satellite assets. "Ladies and gentlemen, the situation has changed. DR." Wallace began, his tone grave. 48 hours ago, our adversaries successfully launched their new Eagle I-7 reconnaissance satellite. Our initial analysis of the intercepted telemetry indicates that its resolution, scanning frequency, and anti-jamming capabilities are at least a generation ahead of our projections. A low murmur rippled through the room. "This means our current Argus systems, phases 1 and 2, are virtually transparent to it," he continued, his words landing like stones. "Many of our most critical strategic assets are now exposed. This constitutes a severe threat to our national security." He paused, his gaze sweeping across the room before settling on me. "Headquarters has made a decision. Project Argus Phase 3, originally scheduled to begin next year, is being activated immediately. The project has been elevated to the highest priority, and I am officially announcing that Major Ethan Hayes will serve as the lead designer and chief engineer. All eyes were on me again. There was some surprise, but mostly a sense of inevitability. I stood up, my voice steady. I won't let you down. Dr. Wallace nodded. Ethan, I'm not giving you a team or a department. I'm giving you the entirety of Research Division 3. Personnel, equipment, budget, it's all yours. I have only one requirement. 6 months. In 6 months, I need a new system capable of countering Eagle Eye 7, a system that can jam its signals, feed it deceptive data, and, if necessary, blind it completely. 6 months. A collective gasp went through the room. It was a nearly impossible timeline. A new strategic-level electronic warfare system, from theoretical design to hardware implementation and coding, would normally take 3 to 5 years. Dr. Wallace saw the doubt on their faces. Let me be clear. This is not a request. It is an order. We have no other choice. Behind us are our homes, our families, our entire country. This is a war with no bullets, fought in the silence of space. And it is a war we must win. The room was silent. Every face was etched with grim determination. I looked at the star map, and the fire that had been lit in me during the flood on the border began to roar. This was my battlefield. 17 after the meeting, I went straight to my office, which was less of an office and more of a command center. 3 walls were lined with floor-to-ceiling server racks, their fans a constant hum. The 4th was a massive, interactive display screen. I pulled up my initial framework for Argus Phase 3. It was a theoretical model I had spent the last 6 months developing in my spare time, and it was the reason Dr. Wallace had chosen me. The original plan was to build it out over 18 months. Now, I had to tear it all down and redesign it for a mission that was no longer theoretical. My aide brought me a case of energy drinks and 2 large jars of instant coffee. He knew that once I entered work mode, sleep became optional. Sir, your team roster is ready. It's the best of the best from the entire command. They're standing by, he reported. Tell them to meet in the main briefing room in 30 minutes, I said, my eyes glued to the data stream on the screen. 30 minutes later, I walked into a room filled with the 30-odd people who would be my team for the next 6 months. I knew most of them, but there were a few new faces. One stood out. His name was Leo Vance. He was 24, a genius who had earned his Ph.D. from MIT a year ago. Rumor had it that, as a student, he had single-handedly breached the firewall of a major cybersecurity firm just to prove he could. He was brilliant, arrogant, and respected no one but Dr. Wallace. He was leaning back in his chair, arms crossed, studying me with a look of open skepticism. I ignored him and went straight to the podium. Good evening, I began without preamble. You all know why we're here. From this moment on, we are one unit. I don't care what you've accomplished in the past or what your personality is. In this project, there is only one rule: execute. My eyes briefly met Leo's. He gave a slight, dismissive smirk. My expectations are simple. First, total secrecy. What happens in this building stays in this building. Second, absolute efficiency. I need you to keep pace with my thinking, or even better, stay ahead of it. Third, complete dedication. For the next 6 months, you have no weekends, no holidays. Your lives belong to Argus. I projected my newly redesigned system architecture onto the main screen. This is my new concept for Phase 3. I call it the swarm architecture. It abandons the traditional centralized processing model in favor of a decentralized, cooperative node system. Every node is both a sensor and a weapon. I began to lay out the design. It was a revolutionary concept, completely different from any existing system. The room, at first silent, slowly filled with the excited chatter of the experts as they began to grasp the enormous potential of the design. As the energy in the room grew, Leo Vance raised his hand. Major Hayes, I have a question, he said, standing up. His tone was a direct challenge. Your concept is theoretically elegant. However, its core algorithm, the protocol that would allow thousands of swarm nodes to coordinate efficiently and instantly in a fluid battle space. Do you have a solution for that? As far as I know, that's a world-class computational problem that current processing power can't handle. He had zeroed and on the single greatest weakness of the entire concept. All eyes turned back to me. I looked at him and nodded calmly. You're right. That is the central problem, and it's your first assignment. You will lead a team to crack the coordination algorithm. I'm giving you 1 week to deliver a viable preliminary model. Leo was stunned. He hadn't expected me to throw the hardest part of the project directly at him. It was both a sign of immense trust and a direct challenge to his arrogance. If he succeeded, he would be a hero. If he failed, he would have to fall in line. A competitive fire lit up in his eyes. 1 week? I don't need a week. I'll have a model for you in 3 days. Good, I said. Then I turned to the rest of the team. Now let's get to work. 18 for the next 3 days. The entire research division operated like a well-oiled machine on the brink of battle. The lights in the labs never went out. The hallways were filled with bleary-eyed but intensely focused engineers, mainlining coffee as they hurried from one task to the next. Data flowed through the servers like a raging river, and lines of code filled the screens. I barely slept, moving between the different teams, coordinating their efforts, and solving bottlenecks. My brain felt like an overclocked CPU, processing a constant stream of information from hardware, software, and structural design teams. Leo Vance kept his word. He and his 5-person team locked themselves in a secure lab. The hallway outside their door became a graveyard of empty pizza boxes and energy drink cans. They attacked the algorithm problem with the ferocity of cornered animals. On the 3rd night, Leo, his eyes bloodshot but blazing with intensity, burst into my office holding a flash drive. Major, the model. It's done, he said, his voice raspy with exhaustion and excitement. We built a new hybrid model based on quantum annealing and genetic algorithms. Initial simulations show a 50% efficiency increase over traditional models. But in a large-scale simulation, we're still seeing a 3% latency and misjudgment rate. I took the drive and plugged it into my workstation. The complex data streams and architectural diagrams filled the screen. I had to admit, Leo was a true prodigy. The elegance and audacity of his algorithm were breathtaking. But in the split-second world of space warfare, a 3% error rate was catastrophic. I know, Leo said, his shoulders slumping. It's the best we can do. It's a hardware problem. We're limited by processing power. Unless we had a true quantum computer. I didn't answer. I just stared at the impossibly complex algorithm on the screen, running simulations in my head, searching for the bottleneck. Leo's approach had been a frontal assault, using a better algorithm to overcome the hardware limitations. But what if the problem wasn't the algorithm itself? My eyes fell on the model's data transfer protocol. It was a standard, multi-handshake protocol designed for maximum stability. It was reliable, but it was also redundant. A radical idea struck me like a bolt of lightning. What if we eliminate the handshake protocol? I said aloud. Leo looked at me like I was insane. Eliminate the handshake? How will we ensure data integrity? A single lost packet could throw the entire system into chaos. Why do we need to ensure 100% integrity? I countered. Our swarm is based on a biological model. Biological systems don't make decisions based on perfect information. In a swarm of bees or a colony of ants, each individual has incomplete, sometimes even incorrect, information. Yet the collective is able to make the most efficient and correct decision. Leo was speechless. I stood up, walked to the large whiteboard, and scrawled a few words: introduce information entropy and fault-tolerant fuzzy logic. I turned back to Leo, who was staring at me, utterly dumbfounded. A fire I hadn't felt in years was burning in my eyes. We don't strive for the perfection of the individual node. We strive for the dynamic equilibrium of the entire system emerging from chaos. We will allow for errors. We will leverage errors. Let the data flow like a tide. Let the nodes make autonomous decisions based on probability and ambiguity. Let the system self-correct through natural selection. We are not building a machine, Leo. We are building a living, thinking, evolving organism. Leo stared at me, then at the words on the whiteboard. His expression shifted from shock to confusion, then to dawning comprehension, and finally, to something approaching religious awe. He finally understood the difference between us. It wasn't intelligence. It was perspective. I understand, he stammered. Major, you're trying to create a god. At that exact moment, the red alert light in my office began to flash, the signal for an imminent and critical intelligence update. I patched it through. DR. Wallace's voice, tight with tension, came over the speaker. Ethan, we have a situation. Eagle Eye 7 has just changed its orbit and entered a synchronous orbit dead zone. We have a 3-hour window where we can probe it without being detected. After that, we lose it for good. I am ordering you to use any and all available assets to acquire a complete signal profile of that satellite within the next 3 hours. The challenge had arrived. A real battle, with no warning, had just begun. 19. All hands, battle stations. My voice echoed through the command center, calm, but carrying the absolute weight of command. Interface with all R&D 3 assets. Activate the swarm. Target, Eagle Eye 7. My order was a boulder dropped into a still pond. Sir, I urge you to reconsider. The most senior engineer, a man old enough to be my father named Dr. Peters, shot to his feet. The swarm is still in the theoretical stage. The core algorithm is unstable. If we deploy it now and it fails, we won't just miss this opportunity, we could expose our capabilities and our entire approach. The risk is too great. He's right, Major. Another team lead chimed in. Argus Phase 2 is stable and reliable. It might be slower, but it's a sure thing. We can at least guarantee some data acquisition. Their caution was justified. Using an unfinished, untested prototype system against a next-generation adversary was a wild gamble. I walked to the holographic star map in the center of the room. The red icon of Eagle Eye 7 was like a phantom, sliding silently toward our most vulnerable sector. Gentlemen, I said, turning to face them, my gaze meeting each of theirs. I understand your concerns, but we are not up against a training drone. We are up against a predator. It chose this orbit at this time precisely because it knew our conventional systems couldn't touch it. With Argus 2, the best we can hope for is to catch a few stray signals. It's like smelling a tiger in the jungle, but never seeing it. My voice dropped, becoming firm and resonant. The swarm, however, is different. It's unstable, yes, but its core design is based on one principle: evolution. It is designed to learn, to adapt, to infiltrate like a virus. The only way to fight an enemy we've never seen before is with a weapon we've never used before. We either sit back and do nothing, or we take a risk that could define the future of our defense. The command center was silent. My words had ignited the spark of daring that lies within every true scientist and engineer. Leo Vance was the first to his feet, his eyes burning with conviction. I'm with the Major. You can't fight an unconventional threat with conventional means. I'm responsible for the algorithm, and I stand by it. I'm in charge of hardware, and I'm with him too, Dar. Peters said, taking a deep breath as if committing to a leap of faith. Let's do it. I'm in. The consensus was unanimous. Good, I said with a sharp nod. All stations, final prep. 5-minute countdown. Leo, get over here. I want you on my console, ready to optimize the algorithm in real time. 5 minutes later, on my command, the swarm was unleashed. On the main screen, millions of virtual nodes, like a true swarm of bees, surged into the vast ocean of data, hunting for Eagle Eye 7. This was a war without sound or fury. Our screens were a waterfall of cascading data streams, the blue for our swarm nodes, red for Eagle Eye 7's defensive shields and decoy signals. The fight was immediately ferocious. Eagle Eye 7's defenses were more robust than we could have imagined. It constantly shifted frequencies and flooded the field with terabytes of convincing-looking false data, trying to lure our swarm into dead ends. Blue icons repeatedly slammed into red walls and vanished. Sir, node clusters 1, 3, and 7 are offline. Report. Target's data encryption is dynamically shifting. Our decryption modules can't keep up. The bad news kept coming. The atmosphere in the room grew heavy. Leo's fingers were a blur on the keyboard, sweat dripping from his forehead. It's no good, sir. Its counter-tracking AI is too advanced. It's leading us in circles. I stared at the main screen, at the blue nodes fighting and dying in the digital maze. My mind was racing, processing possibilities at an impossible speed. We couldn't find it. We had to make it find us. Now, I said suddenly, abandon the full spectrum scan. Reroute 80% of our processing power. I want you to simulate a high-value, unencrypted military communications signal. Expose it. Leo froze. Expose it. Sir, that's suicide. It'll know exactly where we are. Precisely. My eyes were sharp as knives. It's a shark that's been starved. It's looking for blood in the water. Instead of trying to find it, let's give it what it wants. Let it come to us. As soon as it bites, we'll have its DNA. It was an insane tactic, a high-wire act with no safety net. But we were out of options. Execute. Leo gritted his teeth and complied. The swarm changed its strategy. Most of the nodes went dark, coalescing into a single, tempting target, a seemingly vulnerable communications hub, floating silently in the data stream. The seconds ticked by like hours. 10 minutes later, the red phantom moved. Like a master predator drawn by the scent of blood, Eagle Eye 7 began to cautiously approach our bait. The moment it opened its jaws to try and hack our signal, I gave the order. Spring the trap. The tens of thousands of dormant swarm nodes, lying in ambush, instantly activated, forming a digital net that closed in from all sides. But we had underestimated our opponent. In the fraction of a second before our net closed, the core signal of Eagle Eye 7 vanished. In its place, a destructive, overwhelming wave of data erupted, surging back along our own connection, aimed directly at our command center. It had set a trap of its own. It had feigned taking the bait, but its real plan was to use our own attack as a conduit to destroy us. The command center was filled with the deafening shriek of alarms. On every screen, the blue of our system was being consumed by a raging storm of red. 20. Alert. Core server overload at 300%. Firewalls have been breached. Hostile code injection detected. Swarm node losses exceeding 70%. System failure is imminent. The command center descended into chaos. The flashing red lights illuminated faces pale with shock and despair. Our brilliant counterattack had turned into a catastrophic failure. The terrifying data storm was using our own network as a highway, and it was heading straight for our brain. If the core server was destroyed, the entire research division, possibly the entire Fort Meade network, would be paralyzed. The consequences were unthinkable. Major, cut the connection. We have to cut it now. DR. Peter screamed, his eyes wide with terror. It's too late. Leo's voice cracked. It's locked on. It's like a guided missile. We can't detach. All eyes turned to me, waiting for the final order. The order to abandon the system and evacuate. But I stood frozen, my eyes not on the failing system monitors, but on the raw data stream of the incoming red storm. My mind was preternaturally calm. Was I afraid? Yes. But there was something else, too. A strange, exhilarating thrill. This was what I wanted. A living, thinking opponent. Only a crucible this intense could forge the god I had envisioned. Ethan, give the order. DR. Wallace's voice crackled over the intercom from the observation deck, laced with a new and unfamiliar panic. I took one deep breath. Then I gave an order so insane that everyone in the room thought I had lost my mind. Drop all defenses. The command center went utterly silent. People stared at me as if I were speaking a foreign language. Leo, I said, my voice terrifyingly calm. Load the information entropy algorithm I gave you into the main processor. Open all ports. Do not resist. I want you to pull that entire data storm. Inside. Sir, are you crazy? Leo was trembling. It will blow us sky high. That's an order. I locked my eyes on his. You wanted to create a god. Well, gods require sacrifice. Either we are annihilated with the system, or it is reborn from the ashes of our destruction. Leo stared into my eyes, saw the mad confidence there, and was mesmerized. He looked like a man possessed. He grit his teeth, and with shaking hands, he typed the final line of code. An unimaginable roar, not of sound but of pure data, exploded in everyone's mind. All of our defensive firewalls vanished. The apocalyptic red storm, now unopposed, slammed into the core of the swarm system at the speed of light. Every screen in the command center flashed a blinding red, and then, with a series of sharp cracks, more than half of them shorted out, spewing black smoke. It's over. That was the only thought in anyone's mind. But in the midst of that sea of digital death, on the main screen, the core processor into which Leo had loaded the new algorithm did not explode. Instead, it began to pulse with a faint blue light. A single blue star in a sea of blood. The light grew stronger, brighter. It wasn't fighting the red data. It was absorbing it. It was a hungry black hole, pulling in hostile data, disassembling it, and resequencing it. My design, the fault-tolerant fuzzy logic, had been activated by the sheer volume of chaotic data. It was learning. It was evolving. It was treating the enemy's virus as a new strand of DNA. It was treating the enemy's attack logic as a new way of thinking. In a way none of us could comprehend, it was using its own destruction to rebuild and upgrade itself. A miracle was happening on the main screen. The red data streams were no longer a raging storm. They were being tamed, flowing in orderly patterns around the blue heart. And the swarm nodes that had been destroyed were being reborn, regenerating at an exponential rate. But they were not the same. They had incorporated the characteristics of the red data stream. They were more aggressive, more deceptive, more lethal. They were the children of the storm. My God, Leo whispered, sinking to his knees, staring at the screen as if witnessing a divine creation. It ate the data storm? It used it as fuel. Dr. Peter said, rubbing his eyes in disbelief. I said nothing. I simply walked back to the command chair. Get up, Leo, I said calmly. The fight is just beginning. I placed my hands on a keyboard and issued a new command to the newborn swarm. Use Eagle Eye 7's own spear to pierce its shield. Target, core signal, lock on and terminate. A roar of energy seemed to fill the room. On the screen, the reborn blue swarm, now streaked with the red of its assimilated enemy, coalesced into a single, shimmering blade of light. It surged back up the path of the data storm, moving at 10 times the original speed. This time, Eagle Eye 7 had nowhere to hide. In less than 10 seconds, all of its shields and decoys were ripped apart by an attack born of its own strength. At the center of the screen, an impossibly complex, beautiful, and malevolent signal signature was laid bare for us to see. The complete signal profile of Eagle Eye 7. We had it, and in that same instant, the signal vanished forever. The 3-hour window was closed. The command center was dead silent for a full minute, and then it erupted in a tidal wave of cheers, shouts, and tears of joy. 6 months later, the Army's Joint War Fighting Assessment Center, deep underground. This was the military's most advanced combat simulation facility. Today, it would be the stage for the final acceptance test of the Argus Phase 3 system, now officially codenamed Swarm. The command center was filled with high-ranking officers. General Thompson, Dr. Wallace, and dozens of other generals and officials from every branch of the armed forces were in attendance, their faces grim and expectant. They were here to witness if the nation's newest weapon was a dragon slayer or a paper tiger. I stood at the commander's podium in my dress uniform, the newly awarded Distinguished Service Medal pinned to my chest. Beside me stood Leo Vance, also in uniform, his eyes sharp and focused. He was now my lead engineer. Commander, Argus 3 system is online and fully operational. All nodes are green. Awaiting your command, Leo reported, saluting smartly. I returned the salute and looked at the main screen. A red icon, a perfect simulation of Eagle Eye 7 based on the data we had captured, moved unpredictably through the simulated space, its sensors trained on the blue territory below. I keyed the microphone, my voice echoing through the silent command center. Exercise Vindicator is a go. Leo's fingers flew across the console. Swarm, activate. Instantly, the main screen came alive. From all corners of the blue territory, a billion points of blue light rose, converging into a river of data that spread a vast, shimmering net across space, immediately detecting and locking onto Eagle Eye 7. Phase 1, target acquisition complete. Time elapsed, 0.7 seconds. Leo announced with pride. A ripple of astonishment went through the observing generals. To achieve a hard lock on a high-speed, non-cooperative target in such a complex electronic environment in under a second was beyond anything they had ever seen. Phase 2, data intrusion. I ordered. The blue net began to contract, and millions of microscopic data filaments attached themselves to Eagle i7's signal, using the enemy's own algorithms to perform a deceptive handshake. Faced with a virus that shared its own DNA, Eagle i7's defense system suffered a fatal logic error. Its doors were opened without a fight. Phase 3, blind and deceive. On my command, the blue net flared with an intense light. A torrent of carefully fabricated, false battlefield data was injected directly into Eagle i7's sensor array. The main screen switched to Eagle i7's point of view. Below, a missile battery was replaced by a peaceful farm. A naval fleet appeared as a cluster of fishing boats. A squadron of fighter jets was identified as a flock of migrating birds. It was blind. Worse, it was now our puppet, a conduit through which we could feed our